What is going on, everyone, and welcome back. Last episode, we were able to import assets dynamically without having to manually import them. This episode, we are adding the project panel so we can select assets that are inside of our engine currently. Later in the next, I don't know, 5 episodes or whatever, we may get to dynamically importing assets externally outside of the engine for whatever game you may be working on or whatever. And whenever we get to that, then we'll get to make it so that the engine only shows things that we are using in our game versus like textures and skins and stuff that the engine itself is using. But for now, we'll just have it so that it shows what our engine is using, and we can select it and all that good fun stuff. So I recorded this earlier today, and frankly it turned out like crap. There's so much stuff going on that I couldn't really show in a good time frame, because there was so many scripts and so many additions that it was just way too much, and it just got confusing. And yeah, well, I'm sure you understand. So I removed all the stuff that we were importing before. I believe it was sitting right there that I had commented out from the last video. I went ahead and got rid of that, and I got rid of the loop that we had for debugging. Went ahead and got rid of that as well. So what we're going to do in this episode is, since I already have all this programmed in here because of recording previously, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what I added. Now, don't be discouraged, because what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to give you guys the entire project that we have done so far. The entire source folder is going to be in my Patreon, and it will be free, so you don't have to worry about paying for any of it. So how it is at this episode, the source folder will be free to download. Just look for I believe it's a flag or a P or something, orange circle button. Just click on that and you'll be able to download the entire source folder. So I will go ahead and show you what all's done, just so that you're fully aware of everything. And if you want to try to program it instead of download it, be my guest, but it's probably going to be a pain to not do it that way, or to not download it. So in the core folder, or in the core script, let's see here, I changed our rendering square, or our rendering rectangle. And the reason is because the project panel is going on the bottom of the editor, so I had to shrink the application height. So all that's changed right here is just this right here. It's application.height minus 230. I believe before it was just application.height minus 30. So that just changes the rendering rectangle. And next up is the project panel. Now this is almost like the hierarchy and inspector script. Basically it's just a script that has all the drawing methods and stuff for the project panel. So like normal, we get a GUI style, box style, and then I get a null style. That way I can draw like a button that doesn't have a box, but then also render something with a box. I could just switch it out. If you pass in null into a GUI button, you're going to get an error, and that's a big issue. So to fix that, we're just going to pass in empty. I'm pretty sure I've done that before in previous videos, but just to iterate on that, that's why I create these empty styles, so that error message does not pop up if I'm passing in two null GUI styles. And then next we have temp. Temp is just our temporary rectangle variable, just so that we don't have to continuously create rectangles. We can just cache it and then set a new value and blah blah. All right, and here our last variable for the script is a data type. Data type is an enumerator. It is basically just a list of different types of data we can have in our engine. So we have font, material, shader, skin, sprite, texture. They don't have to be in this order, not at all. And if you want more, hey, be my guest, throw more. If you want less, like, I don't know why you would want less, but, you know, you can change it as you see fit. This does not matter at all. It's just to tell me what type of data it is. So right here, I cache it out at the very beginning to data type.texture, which that honestly doesn't matter either. I just wanted to initialize the variable. So in the constructor, all I'm doing is I'm getting the box, and I might want to show that as well, because that's something that was changed as well. Let's see here, GUI skin. So in the GUI skin, right here we have the list of styles that we had before, but now we have a list of skins. And that does not have to be, let's see here. I shouldn't throw any errors. Okay. And I got rid of all the warning messages too, by the way. So that doesn't have to be static anymore. But this is static, because this is a list of all the skins that have been imported into the engine. This is a list of styles for this specific skin. And let's see here. I set the name, because that wasn't in there before. And down here at the bottom, I just said skins.addThis. So I just add this skin to our list of static skins. And here I have a constructor to return our list of skins. And right here is our getter method to get a specific skin by name. And it's a static method. This one is not. So I removed the static method on there. So it's basically exactly the same as GUI style. I mean, there really is no differences. It's just instead of styles, we're doing skins. That's it. And that's all I changed in the GUI skin class. Alright, so now we have this method right here. And this method is to render the types of data, which is why I just called it render types. And it takes in a rectangle. So this is the rectangle that we're going to be rendering it in, obviously, because we're going to be using Windows, so we need that rectangle. So here I just get a list of all the different data types in our enumerator, and then we iterate through it, and we set the temporary rectangle variable. And this right here doesn't matter. This is basically just offsetting it. So if you want this bigger, you want to change this number, and you want to change this number as well. So this is the height difference between the list of data types that we can click on. So if you're using bigger characters, you want to use a bigger number. So it'd be like I times 30. Here we're saying if the iterated value, so if the iterated enumerator type is different than the selected type, so whatever we have selected, if it's different than the current iterated value, then we want to draw a button, a no background or no box button, which is why we're passing in empty, empty. And here for the text, we're just using the name of the enumerator, and then I'm just putting an S at the end, just so instead of it saying font, it'll say fonts, or texture, it'll say textures. So if we click on this empty button, then we want to set the selected type to the value that we're currently iterated at. And if it is the current selected type, then we're going to draw a box, the temporary rectangle. We're going to begin an area at that rectangle, and then we're going to basically do the exact same thing that we did here. And since we began the area at the rectangle that we're supposed to be drawing it in, all we have to do is just pass in 0 and 0. And then, of course, in the area. And the reason why I did this instead of using a button, you might ask, is because I already have it offset, and if I do not do that, it's going to stagger. So I don't want the, say, temp is right here on this one right here on this button. I don't want it to stagger over to like right here. I want it to stay in the same place whenever I click on it. And that's the reason why I do that instead of using button. Now, the next one, this is render assets. This is rendering the assets for that specific type of data. And this is going to be in a separate window. That's why I have rect R right there. And all I'm doing here is right here I'm calling object selected equals editor.getSelectedAsset, which I will go over right now. Editor.getSelectedAsset is basically exactly the same as what we were doing before. Before we were only using this right here. We were using selected as a game object. Well, now we're going to be using things that are not game objects. So of course we're going to need object because we're going to need that script. So we have selected asset and we have inspected. Inspected is the current thing that we're looking at. So I can click on a game object in the hierarchy and it's going to stay selected even though I click on something in the project panel. So if I click on something on the project panel, it'll stay selected when I click on something in the hierarchy and so on. But only the last selected thing, which is the inspected variable, that is what's going to show in our inspector. And let's see here, right here, create a new project panel just like we did with the inspector and the hierarchy. And here we're just drawing the asset types over here in the corner in a little box. And then here calling the render assets method that we created in the project panel. So it would be like this one right here, this box. And the whole point of coming over here and showing you this is the get inspected and set inspected and selected assets. So before, right here in the set selected method, instead of calling set inspected, before we were calling i.setAttributes_o, or i.setAttributes_g is what we had before. The problem with that is, like I said, we're going to be using objects. So set inspected is kind of like a, as you can tell, it's a private method because it's going to be called by set selected or set selected asset. So if I call set selected like I did before, it's going to of course set selected to G, and then it's going to call set inspected object G. So we're going to cast it to an object. And so it's just going to call this set inspected method, which is then going to set inspected to O and then set the attributes. Same thing with get selected asset. It's just exactly the same as set selected, except for we're passing in an object O and we're setting the selected asset to O and then of course set inspected O. And I'll go ahead and do this as well while I'm in here. Go ahead and create a static final project panel, and then I will return P. Right? Yeah, I called it P. All right, there we go. So now we have a static final method. And after that, I'm going to be throwing all this onto Patreon for free after I'm done recording this video. So any changes that you see me do here, it's going to be in the one that you're downloading as well. So don't worry about any of that. So now with set attributes O, before it was i.setAttributes_g because we were passing in a game object. But now, if you didn't already know, I is the behavior attributes. So here is the new behavior attributes. It's exactly the same, except for we're passing in an object and not a logic behavior. Wait. Game object G. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we're passing an object instead of game object, or we're passing an object now instead of game object. So what we're going to do is say this.behavior equals O, and I changed behavior from a logic behavior to object as well. And so I'm just setting the behavior, getting the class, getting the fields, and then right here I'm checking if the object is an instance of logic behavior, then I'm going to set the fields to a new string f.length -1. If it is not an instance of logic behavior, then it's going to be new string f.length. It's not going to have that -1. So that's why it has to be separated like that. And then of course the normal stuff down here. So that covers behavior attributes. Okay, data type, we already covered that. I have not covered that yet, which I will get to. Now back to the project panel class. So I don't know why I'm creating a new integer value right there. Why would I do that? Alright, so I'm going to move this up here. So private int I. And let's not even set it to 0. There we go. So now we don't have to worry about that variable because now it's up there. All right. So the biggest thing is this right here. This right here is the entire function. You may say, but look at all that code. How is that the only thing? Because it's literally identical for each data type. The only difference is we're getting it from a different location and we're setting it from a different location. That's why it has to be separated like this. I'm sure there's other ways around this, and we may change this in the future to eventually shorten it, but it's kind of a pain in the butt, and we'll have to, I'll find something over time to replace this. But for now, it's perfectly fine. Even for later, it is obviously fine because it doesn't actually read any of this stuff like else if. So if it does not equal font, then obviously it skips this whole block of code anyways. So it's not like it's hurting anything. It's just more space. So how this function works is it checks to see if the selected type equals the specific data type that we're currently looking at. So here is font, material, shader, and so on and so forth. So then we're going to get a list of that data type, which I will show now. Because before we didn't have these methods done yet. Font. Like some of them we didn't even have static lists done yet. Like font, I believe, did not have one. I had to actually do this. And that's what took so long, is all these data types. Inside of their scripts, we did not, I failed. I'm not saying anybody else. I failed to go ahead and put this in whenever we were making these scripts, and that's what kind of threw everything off. But basically for all the data types, I had to go through the classes and I would create a list of the static list of everything, or every one of those class instances. And some of them I would have to set the name, and I believe in generate font I had to also say fonts.add this. So then that adds this font to the static list of fonts whenever the font is generated. Most of the other ones were just put in the constructor, like texture, sprite, whatever. It was just done in the constructor, but on fonts I had to do it in the generate font method. And then of course, after I did all of those, I had to make a static function, a static final function, to return the list of fonts or list of textures or list of sprites or whatever. I had to do that for each and every one of these classes. So I don't have to show you any of the rest of those classes because, like I said, it's exactly the same. So then all I do is, or all we do, is loop through the list of data types that we grabbed, or the list of instances for that specific data type. And then we check if selected does not equal null. And that's a big one, because if it does equal null, then we need to add a specific kind of button. And I'll get to this down here. So if it does not equal null, then we check if the current iterated font or item in that list is the same as the selected item. Then we're going to draw a box button in that position, iterated to 26 and 26 high. So this is a box button. So it's the same whether we hover it or not. But then down here, I need to say else if. So saying if this font is not the selected font, then I need to draw an empty button. And same here, if the selected does not equal null, or if selected equals null, I also need to draw an empty button, showing that we aren't currently selecting that item. And it's the same for every single one of these. It's just, like I said, changing it from a list of fonts to a list of materials, list of shaders, and so on. And after all that, I had to change some things in the inspector. And the reason is because I needed to check if the inspected is an instance of a game object. So in the inspector, I get the current inspected, and if I'm currently not inspecting anything, then I need to return out of it, because I don't need to be drawing anything in the inspector. So then I check if inspected is an instance of game object, and if it is an instance of game object, then it's all the code that we have already done before. The only difference is after all this code that we had already done before, and I put in this if block, at the very end I put offset y equals 0. And if you do not add this, then if you click on a game object in the hierarchy, and then you click on something in the inspector, there's a huge offset, and it shows it way down here. If you do it vice versa, then you can click on an asset, and then it'll show it up here, and it's where it's supposed to be. And then you click a game object, it'll be where it's supposed to be, but then when you go back to clicking the project panel, it'll show it way down here again. So that offset is very important. So you got to set that back to 0 at the very end. So then else saying if the, what is it? If inspected is not an instance of game object, then all I'm going to do is say I equals 0, so cache it back to 0, and then I'm going to draw a window using the name of the class, or the simple name of the class, and then I'm going to throw in this draw variables method so that it draws the variables that we need, just like how we do before. Just we're not doing a list of scripts with separate draw variables methods. We're only drawing one because we're only visibly looking at one script. And that is it. That is everything that was changed, which even just talking about it and skimming through it, we're already at 31 minutes. So you could only imagine what it was like whenever I was recording and there's, 10 scripts that's being changed, or actually more than that, probably like 12 or 13 scripts being changed. It was a nightmare. So that's why I'm doing this whole free for this one time download for anybody. If you just go to my Patreon, it's just right there. So whenever we run this, I'll cover this as well. I also changed the window size because I'm in my office right now because I'm finally starting to get everything where it's supposed to be. So I spent some time today, like 2 hours or so, getting everything set up in the office. I haven't brought the lights down yet because my office is also a studio. So I have a lot of stuff I still have to set up. Yeah, I have no idea where I was going with that. But yeah, I don't even remember what I was going with that. So now we can actually click on these. And I guess it does shift it over a little bit. That's right, because I wanted it to shift over. So it shifts over just a hair to align with the box, and it just makes it nicer that way. With a button, it shifts it over way too much. So now we can actually click on these and it will show us. So let's click on sprites. And here is our test sprite that's inside of there. So if we click on that, now bam, it's going to show up in our inspector. And here's the name of test sprite. No, I have not added the ability to change this yet. I don't think. Let's see here. Spriter. I don't believe it's gonna. Oh, okay. I guess it will. All right. So yes, we can change the name variable. We also have material, offset, padding, but of course we haven't done these variable types yet, so they are going to be empty. Some things like font, there is no variables currently available because we haven't done that stuff yet, so it's going to be empty. And there's several of them that are going to be empty. See, textures as well. Skins, you can change the name. Later I'll get the texture and all that stuff in there. We'll have object variable types, like texture is actually going to be an object field. So it'll look like this, but whenever you click on it, you'll be able to add textures to it, whatnot. So that is it for this episode. It's starting to come together. Oh, yeah, that's where I was getting with the whole office thing. Duh. Is I'm currently using a different screen. I'm using a smaller monitor, which is just a TV at the moment. So I had to shrink this to make it smaller. So on your monitors, most likely, whenever you download the project or get the sources, you're gonna have to change the application size because it's gonna be pretty small. I changed it to, I think, 1200 by 600 or something like that, something stupid, just so they would fit on this tiny little screen. So I hope you guys find this informative, and once again, I'm sorry that I was not able to make a video of doing it all in the moment. That's why everything is done. But next time we will be back on track, and I don't believe we shouldn't have to change a whole bunch of other crap in the meantime as well. So we should be back to doing normal stuff. So don't forget to go to Patreon and download this source folder. So next time we will work on a file menu bar. So we will actually have this where it'll highlight for us for boxes. We will have things in each one of these, and we should be able to get to this right here, which is pop-up boxes. So we should be able to get to the point where, or in the next episode, where we can do this. So we can click on it, it'll highlight it, it'll have the pop-up, we can go through, we can click on it. If we move off of it, this whole pop-up is going to disappear. So if we move over here, it'll just disappear. But if we move to, like, if we go up like this, it will select, navigate in this scenario. So it'll show this. So it will work exactly the same as this, except for if we move off of it, it will remove it. And you can change that as well, but we'll get to that next episode. So I will see you then, and happy programming.